Welcome to AP Euro for Winners.
Today, we are continuing Unit 3, talking about the balance of power.
Balance of power is this idea that we need to understand in Europe, and it's going to take place from the 1600s to the 1700s. And the idea is that there's this goal of maintaining a balance of power in Europe, meaning they do not want one country from getting too much power and taking over. So we see an increased emphasis on war, which leads to a need for stronger central governments because we have more taxation, a larger bureaucracy, meaning more people involved in the government, and professional armies. And this increased central control is going to lead to some internal conflicts between nobles and monarchs. And we're going to see how this plays out across the continent. We're going to go into a ton of different examples in this lesson.
So, in order to reduce internal conflicts, leaders at this time needed to do a bunch of things. They needed to make alliances, whether through marriage or political alliances. They needed to practice foreign policy to know what's going on around them and try to maintain some alliances. They needed to help the people so there was no civil war going on they had to deal with. And most importantly, they need to maintain a standing army that's going to protect their country and even fend off any possible attacks. An example here is Frederick William. He's a leader of Prussia, and he has a governing ability that leads Prussia from a small
Touchy.
duchy to a large kingdom.
We're not going to talk about this guy anymore, but AP wants us to know about him. So know about him. And he's got a look at his pick. He's kind of cool looking. So, some context. We should know all this already, okay? You know all this stuff. I put a meme in there. All right. So, the European countries sought to preserve a delicate balance of power following the 30 Years' War and the Peace of Westphalia. Okay, so what's the 30 Years' War? Real quick. Remember, that's the fighting in Europe after the Protestant Reformations between the Lutherans, the Protestants, and the Catholics. Okay, and then that ends with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, where German princes are now allowed to decide their own religion, which means there's more power given to the Protestants. The Holy Roman Empire loses some of that power. That's kind of where we're at right now. What's up? Less religious conflicts. Sorry. Okay, so look, more context means that there's a diminished role of religion, which is going to lead to increased political conflict. So remember we talked about the 30 Years' War kind of stops being about religion and starts to become more about politics? Well, there's less and less religious conflict, and it's going to be political conflict now. Okay, we got new nations that are becoming on the rise. I shouldn't say new ones, but nations that are coming on the rise, and they're going to try to challenge the established European powers that are already there. War is now the primary way for countries to build their nations within Europe. There's going to be tons of competition for resources and colonies if we're thinking about the economies of mercantilism. Okay. And all this new systems that we're talking about means there needs to be a strong central government, and that countries that have that strong central government are going to be successful and they're going to grow. They're going to get more and more power. Countries that don't have that strong central power are going to fall victim to their neighboring countries.
And we'll see examples of that. So let's take a second and look at military technology. So advances in military technology are going to lead to new forms of warfare, with greater reliance on firearms, cannons, and fortifications. Right? All of this had to be financed with high taxes and kind of produced by the state. This meant that there's a huge, even bigger need for a large central government now, because who's going to finance this military technology? We don't want any country falling behind. They all want to keep up with one another. So let's keep going on that thought. States needed to have the large central government. We've gone over this. Please make sure you're getting that in your head. They needed to have an increase in revenue, so that means they're going to increase taxes on their people. They're going to produce the resources for new weapons. All of these things are going to tip the balance of power in favor of the states that can do this the quickest and the biggest.
Map time. This is Europe at about 1500. Take a look. Think about what we notice, okay? We're going to talk about one of these countries that's sort of trying to make their way into Europe in Southeast Europe, the Ottoman Empire. That's the first one we're going to talk about. Okay, so the Ottoman Empire from the around 1500 to the late 1600s, the Ottoman Empire is strong and stable. They're like if you think modern day Turkey, we just saw them on the map. But they want to expand. They want to keep pushing into Europe. And if the Ottoman Empire is allowed to push into Eastern Europe, this is going to threaten Austria and Poland, which are their neighbors, if you saw them on the map. Now, as the Ottoman Empire tries to push into Eastern Europe, they get defeated at this battle called the Battle of Vienna. and they get defeated by the Austrians. And this is because Austria and Poland worked together to defeat them at the Battle of Vienna, so the Ottoman Empire cannot extend into Europe. So what's the outcome here, right? We talked about Ottoman Empire is pushed back from Vienna. The Austrian Empire is allowed to exist. They have this multi-ethnic state. They have a lot of different groups in there, but they're allowed to exist. But main idea, and we're going to talk about this all day, okay? The balance of power is maintained. Ottoman Empire is not allowed to take over these other countries. These other countries kind of come in. Balance of power is there. You can see this little graphic on the bottom, right? The Ottomans are trying to take over. They go to the Battle of Vienna, and the Battle of Vienna stops them from getting to Central Europe.
Nothing like Tom and Jerry.
Another map for you. So we see the Ottoman Empire, they do push up, right? But they're kind of pushed off by Austria and Hungary. All right. The next country we're going to talk about, though, is one of the strongest countries that we've mentioned in this class, France.
So let's take a deeper dive into France. In the 1600s, France is to be the largest country in Europe. It's got the most amount of people. It's going to hold colonies in the Americas. It's got political stability with their ruler, King Louis XIV, right? As pictured there. We like his legs, clearly. So let's talk about France.
We're going to talk a lot more about Louis XIV in other lessons, but this is just a little intro to him.
So Louis XIV is going to constantly go to war, and he's always going to want to expand the French Empire. An example of that is the Dutch War, where France and its allies are going to be against the Dutch Republic and its allies. Well, France wins, gains land. Louis XIV becomes the most popular or powerful monarch in Europe. It's really going to upset the balance of power, because a lot of European countries are like, well, crap, I'm threatened by France. So we have the 9 Years' War as another example, where it's France versus the Holy Roman Empire, England, Spain, Dutch, Portugal, and all these countries, right? That's a lot. That's 1v6. France is going to lose some of the land in this war, but it showed that France could also be challenged, right? France wasn't this undefeatable force. If other countries rallied together, they could kind of keep France in check. And then we have the War of Spanish Succession, where Charles II of Spain is going to die. He's going to leave all of the Spanish lands to this guy named Philip V. Actually, side note, Philip V is the grandson of Louis XIV of France. So this setup threatened to combine the thrones of France and Spain. And we just saw on the previous slide, other countries are already threatened by France, and now they have the thought of France and Spain joining as one. Holy crap, that's not going to work. People are not going to be happy with that at all, other countries. So this could have been very strong for France, but war broke out, and it prevented France from doing this, combining with Spain. Wasn't allowed to happen.
Just want to show you a quick family tree here, because I know it's pretty confusing, all these names. So we just talked about Charles II of Spain dies, and he's at the bottom here. But this is the Spanish line of monarchs. And I want to see you at the top. Charles I in Spain is the Charles V that we called him Charles V, okay? The guy from the 30 Years' War. Remember how we said when he died, he left the Spanish part? He's the first Habsburg. He left his Spanish part to Philip II. We talked about Philip II with the 30 Years' War, okay? So if we go down a couple more people to the next one we really talk about, that's Charles II, right? So when he dies, that's when we're talking about he leaves his land to Philip V, which is his son, and that's where we get the War of Spanish Succession. I just wanted you to be able to see this because I know it gets a little confusing, because their names or the number after their name is different depending on what country you're talking about them from, and that kind of blew my mind. So as the War of Spanish Succession ends, it ends with something called the Treaty of Utrecht. Okay, so France and Spain are still ruled by one family, but it's called the Bourbon dynasty. Louis XIV of Bourbon, okay? But they're not allowed to rule under one crown. So this does maintain the balance of power on the continent, and Louis XIV's expansionism is maintained. So
halted, not maintained.
Yeah, sorry. The expansion of him is halted, sorry, of Louis XIV. The balance of power is maintained. So the long-term outcomes for Louis XIV and his warring ways, we're going to get into these more in some other lessons too, but just so we get started here, there's a lot of financial strain on France. France is going to get into a lot of debt because Louis XIV, as we saw, there's already 3 wars we talked about in 2 slides, okay? So a lot of financial strain. There's a lot of taxes he needs to raise. And this is going to be the beginnings of some social unrest that we're going to see in the 1700s, which is not going to end too great for the kings of France, okay? And then, again, the idea here, Europe is willing to unite against super strong countries and states from becoming too powerful, like they united against France time and time again. Map time. So we see France, right? They went through all these wars. They didn't gain that much land. All right. So this is that's one of the big things we're talking about. The next country we're going to talk about is in Northeast. We haven't talked about them yet in this class, I don't think. So this is the first time we're going to talk about them. Poland. Here we go.
And Poland's a really good example of kind of the opposite side. What happens when you don't have a strong central government? What are other countries going to do to you, right? So let's take a deeper dive. In the 1500s to the early 1700s, Poland's pretty strong and stable. They're doing their thing. Except we have these internal issues that are going to start to arise. And they're really going to be focused around this thing called the Liberian veto. And that veto is going to require all parliamentary measures to be passed unanimously. What that means is 100% of the people need to come to the same consensus and agree on something, whether they're passing the law or not. Right? That is nearly impossible. 100% of people can't really agree on anything these days. So that means that the Polish monarchy couldn't really get control over the nobility, which are the ones that are involved in the parliament. So it's going to make it nearly impossible for any decisions to get passed or made by the monarchy at all. So this leads to divisions within Poland. We've got neighboring countries of Russia, Austria, and Prussia are going to see this weakness, and they're going to be like, all right, well, Poland's got land. I want land. They're going to surround Poland, and they're going to be ready to invade it. Meanwhile, Poland's also going through a civil war because, as we talked about with the monarchy not being able to get anything passed, there's tension between the monarchy and the nobility. Right? The nobility is the ones that need to pass things unanimously. So there's a civil war going on. Side note, it's egged on by Russia's Peter the Great, but we'll get to him. So, civil war. Combining those two things, the Polish monarchy couldn't make any decisions fast enough with the Liberian veto, and Poland couldn't really do anything about it. Russia, Austria, and Prussia move in, and they divide up Poland. They partition Poland among the three powers. And this balance of power is still maintained because, yes, while they overtook Poland, you can see on the map that those three powers did divide up Poland's land. Not one country got all of them. While it does look like Russia got most, it's still a little bit more of a balance of power in the division. So this is an example of how internal instability is going to lead to external weaknesses to the point where it pretty much caused the disappearance of Poland from the European map until World War I, when it eventually gets recognized as a sovereign nation. But that's a long time from then.
I just want you to, that term partitioning of Poland, that's what AP is going to use. That's when Poland gets split up. And we wrote it in here. So just make sure we're aware. Partitioning just kind of means splitting it up. Okay, so that was a lot today. I know, but I'm so proud of you for getting there. These are the historical developments. There's a ton of them here. So take a moment to take a look at them.
Thanks for watching. Shout out to our AP Euro kids. We will see you all for the next video on absolutist approaches to power.
Until then, bye.